This is Pat Soundbites Unplugged, the podcast where all the artists go to tell it as it is. Careers, music, tours, and more. And here's your host, the man that refuses to eat squid, Pat Calamari.
Hey, Pat Calamari here, the host of Pat Soundbites Unplugged podcast, episode number 32. Moving right along. No Throwback Thursday today. Today is all heading upstream. What a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with the amazing Joe Elliott. Yes, Joe Elliott of the iconic Def Leppard. He is also the frontman of a band called Down and Out. They've been around for 10 years. Super group made up of other bands, musicians from other bands, from the Choir Boys and Wayward Sons and Vixen. So you can understand the complexity of trying to get together, write an album, record an album, maybe even go on tour. It's hard to do these days when, as Joe uses the word, the mothership, everybody's in a bigger mothership like Joe is with Def Leppard, which takes a lot of his time. But you're going to see more, and I see more and more artists going outside the box and expanding what I call their musical bloodlines and creative outlets, and playing different stuff or things that really influence them. If you know Phil Cullen from Def Leppard, he's the lead guitarist, but he really loves blues, and he's got a rock and blues side band called Delta Deep, who I met, who I hung out with, who I got to see live. Great stuff. Vivian Campbell goes back he's in a band called Last in Line, going back to his Ronnie James Dio roots, put together with Vinny Apathy on drums. Got together with Viv, said, hey, why don't we do some Dio stuff, and boom. Add the wonderful Phil Soussan on bass and Andrew Friedman on vocals, and you got Last in Line. And as I speak, they are working in the studio right now on their third album. And they have to do it now because Vivian's going to be on tour in the summertime with Def Leppard. So now's the time to get all that stuff done. Yes, this album is called This Is How We Roll. It's a great album. Great songwriting by Joe. All piano driven. Different than Def Leppard. 70s music vibe. Elton John, Journey, I mentioned Queen, Bowie. Piano driven. If you don't know anything about Def Leppard, it's all guitars. You don't hear any piano in Def Leppard. But this is a different element, a different side of Joe Elliott, which is over the top. He does a terrific job. These songs are, I'm like, wow, Another Man's War. This Is How We Roll. Good Night, Mr. Jones. All about, I think, more or less his tribute to the wonderful David Bowie. Creatures. Last Man Standing. I mean, what a ballad. Boys Don't Cry. Great tune. Walking to Babylon. Great tune. Let It Shine. I mean, a lot of terrific work done into this, and it took 5 years to get done, but it's done. Go buy it. It's available on CD, album, digital, but please buy it. Do not just stream it. Buy it. We talk a little bit about Def Leppard. We talk about his vocals, and we talk about the stadium. Talk about Def Leppard's longevity, and I only had 15 minutes, and I tried to make the best out of it. But it was great to talk to Joe from his home in Dublin, Ireland. Love doing what I do, Pat Soundbites Unplugged. Just doesn't get any better than this. Every day is a different day, and here I'm talking to these, my heroes, my legends, the bands that I've grew up supporting. So I'm going to continue to play a lot of tracks from Down and Out. And you know me, keeping new music alive on the radio airways is what I do. So look forward to that on WBXO. Enjoy the chat, live, love, and laugh a lot. Life is just way too short, my friends. Enjoy. Here is Mr. Joe Elliott. WBXO Classic Rock Redefined in conjunction with Pat Soundbites Unplugged podcast. Such an honor to have a frontman of not one incredible band, but two incredible bands. I'm talking Down and Out and the iconic great Def Leppard. I'm talking with Mr. Joe Elliott. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, Patrick. Thank you very much. How are you?
I am super excited to have you on the phone. I can't thank you enough for your time. I love the band Down and Out. I love this album. I've been playing the hell out of every track as much as I can. I don't even know which one's my favorite anymore, to be honest with you. But Joe and Down and Out has released their third album last October, their first in 5 years. It's entitled This Is How We Roll, and I love every bit of it. I've been a fan since, well, like you said, 10 years ago with Overnight Angels, and it's been nonstop. And I got to say, my friend, you really hit the ball out of the park.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. You know, it's good to be able to get these songs out of my head. You know, because once we got this project rolling 10 years ago, which is ridiculous when you think about the fact that the Beatles were rolling together for like 8. You know, but we made that first album. You know, kind of after we did the what was supposed to be just a one-off 45-minute performance opening for Mott the Hoople, and then we got press ganged by a bunch of fans to make an album, and as you say, with like Overnight Angels, we had some great success at radio, which encouraged us to make a second album, which is what we did in 2014 with the Further Adventures of the Down and Out. Then it came to the third album, we kind of figured there's a well had run dry with doing just straightforward cover songs, so I said to the guys, why don't we try and write an album? And as we kind of moseyed along in our other day jobs, if you like, because you've got to understand, I'm in Leopard, and we've been very, very, very busy for the last 5-6 years. Three of the guys in the choir boys, we've got Cher from Vixen on bass, and a guy called Phil Martini on drums, who's in a British band called Wayward Sons. They've all got day jobs, and it's hard to nail everybody down at one time. When I said, let's write some songs, everybody said, okay, but they were all too busy writing songs for their own bands, and I was the only one that really had the opportunity to come up with songs, so I just kept writing, and then all of a sudden we had an album, and turned out quite well, I think.
Well, my goodness, Joe, I have to certainly applaud you for going outside the box. It's a great mix of music. I love the piano sound, and overall your voice is amazing on these tracks. And I want to let the folks know, although you Def Leppard is your mothership, as I've heard you use that word, this is a little bit different in a great way, in its own way, more of a 70s vibe. I tell the fans, Joe, if you mix Elton John and some Journey and some Bowie and some Queen, and you love piano, rock-driven music, and you mix it in a blender, you get the amazing sound and band of Down and Out. Would you agree? Is that a proper way to explain what you got going on here?
Yeah, I'd say the majority of what you just said there, it rings true. You know, the fact is that when Def Leppard sit down to write songs, we kind of campfire things with guitars, as you can imagine. You know,
right.
But when I wrote these songs, I sat at a piano, which is not something that you ever do in Def Leppard, so I knew that the songs were never going to overlap, and there was never going to be a conflict of interest from my point of view. Lyrically, it's a little more autobiographical than celebratory, which is what Leopard would be. So again, it comes from a different headspace, and it's just a headspace that's been occupied for a long time with ideas that I've not really had the chance to exploit. And with this record, I have, so it just shows a different side, and it is still rock and roll. It's got the drums and the bass and the guitars, just like most rock bands do, but it has that driving piano that just adds a fifth element to everything, a different color to the palette, and you think of the great bands that have piano in them, like Mott the Hoople, Queen, the Spacers, on occasion the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, and then Elton John, and even to a point that one song to me sounds a little like it owes a tip of the hat to Leon Russell. It's just very very different to what people expect from me, and that's part of the fun for me, because it's nice to just make people eyebrows go up a bit and go, really?
Yeah.
Him?
Well, no,
there's really not much point in being in two bands that sound identical, so it had to be pretty different.
Yeah, no, it's great. The album, This Is How We Roll, just fantastic. It's radio rock friendly. Your lyrics, the catchy lyrics, incredible guitar riffs, wonderful harmonies and backing vocals. And as you said, and I see more and more artists getting together outside their normal band to expand what I'll call your musical bloodlines and creative outlooks. And the incredible members of your band, Def Leppard, no exception. I've met Phil and the band Delta Deep. I love Deb and Forrest and Robert, Viv, and going back to his DnO roots with Last in Line. I love those guys. So, yeah, no, I see more and more of this trend, and I think it's great. For a guy that can play any track at any time, my motto is keeping new music alive on the radio airways. So I applaud you, and I thank you for what you've done. As I mentioned to you, if I want a killer Joe Elliott song, I don't know if I want to go to Another Man's War, or if I want to crush you with Boys Don't Cry, if I want to go halfway home, it's This Is How We Roll or Creatures, and then you got the Goodnight Mr. Jones, and my goodness, Last Man Standing, Joe. Holy crap, what a great song. I mean, the whole album is put together quite well. Let me just ask you, when you were writing the songs, I got the feeling that these songs showcase the musicianship of maybe the guys in the band, the Paul, Keith, Cher, Griff, and Phil, as you said, especially with the guitar and the piano. Was that a thought that you had musically going into this, writing the songs for this album?
Yeah, I kind of wrote them with everybody in mind. I was scratching an itch, like I said, it was like a vein of unmined gold nuggets for me. It's like one side of my brain was just temporarily closed off to those ideas, and I just opened it up and it just came flowing out. But I certainly created space to show off what they were capable of, because Keith Weir is a phenomenal keyboard player. I mean, I played some of the piano on the record, and I played the piano on all the demos that I did, but he took them way to a different level. I kind of equated to the same situation as Bowie when he was writing all the songs for Hunky Dory, but when he came to recording, he got Rick Wakeman in to do the real work. And that's why Life on Mars and stuff like that sounds so great, But Paul Gearing is a phenomenal guitar player, especially when it comes to melodic solos and stuff like that. Very steeped in the 70s, which is exactly what all these songs are. So when it came to like the middle section of Goodnight Mr. Jones and the middle section of Last Man Standing, I specifically kind of wrote those pieces so that I knew he'd be very fluent through that section and he wouldn't shut people off, because a lot of people sometimes they get to what you might call the indulgent part of the song, which is the solo section, and they just shut down. I wanted the solo sections to sound pleasing to people that don't know how to play an instrument. They weren't written to sound good to another guitar player. I wanted the layman that doesn't play the guitar, doesn't likes the sound of one but doesn't know how to play it, and they can hear the sounds coming out going, yeah, that floats my boat. So it wasn't about Paul showing off how fast he can play. It was more about playing to the tune, and he's really good at doing that. Well,
he certainly showcases that. Like you said, Goodnight Mr. Jones is like, wow, the solo part. And I took it as I know you're a big fan of David Bowie, and you were able to get your emotions as a tribute to David in that beautiful song, well written. Last Man Standing, as I said before, holy crap, God took an axe to my family tree so things don't look godly to me. I mean, I just love those lines. Boys don't cry, girls don't forget it. I mean, I'm hearing Elton John with the piano, the harmonies, live your life like it's the last day on earth, and that last word that you said on earth, and then the guitar takes off. Walking to Babylon, the piano, it sounds like a gospel choir, backing vocals, the violins, I hear like a little ELO influence. Give me your hand. I mean, Joe, just phenomenal. Great stuff. And again, I can't say it enough.
I took pretty much every influence that I had before I joined Leppard and put them into a bucket and give them a damn good stir, So there is, Jeff Lynne, ELO were a huge favourite of mine growing up as a kid. more so Mott and Queen, obviously, but anything with a piano, especially Elton John, when I listen back to like the Goodbye Yellow Brick Road album and I'm listening to things like Love Lies Bleeding and the Ballad of Danny Bailey, All the Young Girls Love Alice, there's some stunning piano playing, but it's still all within the format of rock, you know, and I've always admired that, and in Leppard, it was never going to be part of our DNA to be that way, but it doesn't mean that I was never going to, I'd lose interest in listening to that kind of music. So when the opportunity in a second band came along to maybe exploit that side of things, it was a no-brainer for me because it keeps you fresh. It means that when you go back to writing with Leppard, you go back with a different head on and you're not trying to force stuff that doesn't work just because you've got these songs in your head that aren't maybe appropriate. You've already dealt with them, so you can move on, and I think that's a healthy situation for us all to be in.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what Phil and even Viv passed on to me. You know, trying doing their old stuff or new stuff, it just keeps them way fresh. And he says it's a healthy experience. All in all, it's a home run for going back when you sit back with Leppard. So I certainly agree with you. Your vocals are amazing, as I mentioned before on this album, and I know in 2016, you had these killer bouts of double pneumonia. Are you? And your voice is just so much. It's incredible now. You sound great. Are you taking any preventive measures these days, Joe, or going to a vocal coach? Or
I'm trying not to catch pneumonia again. That's a great preventive measure, you know. I really suffered like 4 years ago, whatever it was. I really got a bad dose. We came off the boat, which was not a great experience for us. I lost my voice on the rock cruise. Jimmy Bain lost his life, and we couldn't dock anywhere because the weather, we almost went overboard, you know.
Oh.
So it was not a great start to the year, and that whole year was just really tough. It took me a long time to get my voice back into shape. But yes, I've been working on and off with a vocal coach since '92 anyway. But you know, there's nothing that a vocal coach can do when you get ill.
Right.
It's like working with a trainer and you break your leg. You know, you have to wait for it to heal before you can start training again. So, but he built me back up, and slowly but surely it all came back into shape and came back better than he was. Actually, it was just because I worked so hard at it. It came back in a different strength because I really worked 7 days a week with this guy, even when I was touring. And in fairness, with the down and out stuff, I don't think in the same registers as Leppard. So it gives another side to what I'm capable of doing. Some of the Leppard stuff we do is low and it goes high. Some of the Leppard stuff is high and it stays high. On the down and out, it's mostly mid-range, and I just go high for effect on a couple of songs, like on maybe Walking to Babylon and a couple of notes on Boys Don't Cry. I was more concerned about just getting the melodies right, you know, and having the melodies sound pleasing, if you like, and you know, you want to try. They're hooks. I mean, these things are hooks, and the reason they call them hooks is because you're trying to hook people in to go, you know, whistling in the shower the next day, and somebody goes, what's that tune you're humming? And then the word spreads and songs become famous and popular, you know. But yeah, my chops are in great shape at the moment. They have been for the last couple of years, getting better and better all the time. So long may it last.
There you go. Well, the melodies are incredible, and I've been singing the song since the album's been released, and I get it. You know, fans have asked me, well, you think, you know, Joe and the guys will be able to do some live dates? And I go, you know, everybody's got their own little thing going on, so logistically it would be a complicated challenge. Maybe somewhere in the UK or here or there they might be able to pull it off, and I know you would love to do it, but you got the big US stadium tour coming up. I got to mention that. Congratulations, 11 shows sold out. I can't wait to catch up to you in a show or in one of the shows or two. And then you look back at your years with Leppard, almost 42 years or so. You know, High and Dry, almost approaching 40, Paramania 37, Hysteria 33. When you look back, Joe, do you pinch yourself going, oh my God, everything that we've done and lasted so long, and we're still better than ever and going strong? Do you pinch yourself looking back these days?
Yeah, because, you know, when any of these bands form that have done this, you know, like the numbers you just threw by me there, you know, happened to say Pink Floyd, Zeppelin, Beatles, Stones, etc. 10, 15 years ago, you know.
Right.
So we've moved into their orbit now, if you like. But when we started, when those bands started, not one of the members of those bands thought they'd still be around 40, 42, maybe 50 years after the event, that they'd still be doing this. There was, when they formed these bands in the 60s and the 70s, there were no bands that were around for 25, 30 years.
Right.
So anybody that is, like the Stones or the Who would be the obvious one. They are setting the precedent for everybody else, and the ones just behind them, which would be like maybe Aerosmith, AC/DC, and then there's a decade below, which would be us and Iron Maiden and Duran Duran and Depeche Mode and, you know, whoever it be, Bon Jovi. There's a lot of, you know, Motley Crue. There's a lot of bands that came out late 70s, early 80s that are still going as well. But this is the norm now, but it certainly wasn't the norm back then. So, of course, you pinch yourself to a point because, you know, when you got together as kids, you're thinking, well, you know, mid-20s, 30s, we'll do 10 years if we're lucky like the Beatles or the Stones or, you know, Led Zeppelin. And then something else comes along. But then the industry grew and it changed, and all of a sudden it was okay to be a veteran, and it was okay to be a legacy artist. And in fairness, the legacy artists seem to be the ones that are doing the best at the moment. You know, because there's this mid-period where there's nothing in the middle. You know, you've either got these great new bands coming through, like Dirty Honey and Greta Van Fleet and the Struts, or you've got Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles.
Right.
The middle section, you've got us coming in, but what came after us never really took off. So, other than, say, Pearl Jam, that have maintained a massive popularity out of the 90s, there's really not that many that survived the 90s. In the same kind of, you know, elitist style of a Led Zeppelin or a Beatles or whatever. And, you know, we have to wait and see what happens to everybody else. But the ones, you kind of get the impression that the ones that got burnt into your retina via MTV, if they stuck around, they literally stuck around in people's memories. Because who can forget the videos for, you know, Rio when they're on the boat in Duran Duran and on the yacht, or me jumping off the drum riser in photograph in slow motion in the Union Jack shirt, ZZ Top with the cars and the spinning furry guitars. These things registered with people, you know, and the artists that are still around that make those kind of videos seem to be surviving because of they made a connection with people. And that connection still exists, which is, you know, I think a very important kind of contribution to why bands like us are still around.
Well, your point is very, very well valid. And the industry, musically and record selling and everything, you're right. The videos, you never forget the videos. And you're right, there is a void. The 90s, I can only think of a handful of bands that are, you know, the Collective Souls, the Jim Blossoms. That was a tough time. I know I'm over my time a little bit, Joe. The album is This Is How We Roll. It's available on CD, LP, digitally, on all the outlets. Buy this amazing album. Don't just steal it and download it, buy it. Joe and the band worked extremely hard. It is one of the best albums out there today, and I will continue to play the tracks as I love the whole thing. Joe, anything to say to the fans and the listeners before we wrap up here?
Hey, listen, I'm still doing this. I'm happy if anybody listens to the Down and Outs record that you'll find something interested in it, and for those Leopard fans, can't wait to see you all again this summer.
There you go. Well, Joe, I hope you enjoyed the chat as much as I have. I'm looking forward to a stadium show, maybe one or two. All the best and continued success. And again, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure, buddy. Anytime. Appreciate it.
Grab a Guinness and lift it up, buddy, because you certainly deserve it. I love the album. Joe Elliott on WBXO, Classic Rock Redefined, and Pat Soundbites podcast Unplugged. It doesn't get any better than this. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate it, buddy.